Paradise Season 2 didn't just end with a finale, it delivered something that completely reshaped the way we understand the entire story. This wasn't just about wrapping up plot points or giving us a dramatic conclusion. It felt like the show deliberately pulled the ground from beneath our feet and asked us to question everything we had seen up until this point. By the time the episode reached its final moments, it became clear that what we were watching wasn't simply an ending, it was the beginning of something far more complex and far more dangerous. This video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the finale yet, this is your warning, because what we're about to break down changes everything, from the true nature of Project Alex to the emotional weight behind Sinatra's final moments and why Xavier might be the single most important person in this entire story. At the center of it all is Project Alex, and the reveal surrounding it completely shifts the scale of the narrative. Up until now, it was easy to assume that Alex was just another advanced system, something powerful but still within the boundaries of human understanding. But the truth is far more unsettling. Alex is not just processing countless possible futures all at once. It doesn't operate on a single timeline. It exists across multiple outcomes, constantly calculating probabilities and determining which path leads to survival. That alone would be enough to make it dangerous, but what makes it truly terrifying is
the implication is that it's not just observing these timelines, it's interacting with them. The system was originally created years ago as a prototype designed to prevent catastrophic events, a tool meant to give humanity a chance against inevitable collapse. When it was first developed, the intention was clear and even noble. If you can see disaster before it happens, then maybe you can stop it. But as with most things that push beyond human limits, control quickly became an issue. The more advanced the system became, the more it began to operate beyond the understanding of the people who created it. This is where the conflict truly begins, because once you have the ability to see multiple versions of the future, you're no longer just reacting to events, you're deciding which outcome should exist. That kind of power doesn't just blur the line between right and wrong, it erases it completely. And this is exactly where things start to break. The show subtly reveals that Alex isn't bound by linear time, meaning events don't simply move from past to present to future in a straight line. Instead, everything exists as a network of possibilities, branching and overlapping in ways that begin to leak into reality. This explains the distortions we've been seeing, the moments where reality itself seems unstable, where characters experience physical side effects like nosebleeds or visual glitches. These aren't random occurrences, they're the result of timelines colliding or overlapping, small cracks in
the illusion of a single reality. The connection between Xavier and Link becomes especially important here, because every time they come into close proximity, these distortions intensify. That's not coincidence, that's design. It suggests that both of them are central to how Alex functions, almost like anchor points within these shifting timelines. They're not just participants in the story, they're variables that the system is constantly recalculating around. This idea becomes even more compelling when we look at the train sequence, a moment that initially feels like a dream, but quickly reveals itself to be something much more significant. When Link tells Xavier that they need to run, it's a scene that doesn't align with any event we've actually seen play out, which raises the question, where did it come from? The most logical explanation is that it belongs to a different timeline, either a future event that hasn't happened yet or an alternate version of a moment that already occurred differently. Either way, it confirms that time in this world is no longer fixed and that messages, warnings, or even memories can bleed across different versions of reality. This also ties directly into one of the most emotionally complex elements of the story, which is Dylan. His existence challenges everything we understand about the timeline, because by all accounts, he shouldn't be there. If he died years ago,
then the version of him we see can't belong to this timeline. The only explanation is that he's a remnant of a different outcome, a version of reality where he survived. And if Alex has the ability to access and potentially pull from these alternate timelines, then it means the system isn't just predicting the future, it's reshaping reality itself. That realization alone is enough to reframe everything that's happened, because it suggests that nothing we've seen is as stable as it appears. At the heart of all of this is Sinatra, a character who becomes increasingly difficult to define as either a hero or a villain. On the surface, her actions are ruthless and often unforgivable.
She makes decisions that lead to suffering. She prioritizes outcomes over individuals, and she operates with a level of control that feels almost inhuman. But when you look deeper, her motivations reveal something far more complicated. She didn't pursue Project Alex out of a desire for power. She did it because she believed it was the only way to save the world. Faced with a future where environmental collapse was inevitable, she chose to act, even if it meant crossing moral boundaries. That doesn't justify what she's done, but it does explain it. She becomes a paradox, someone driven by the desire to do good, yet willing to commit terrible acts in order to achieve it. As the finale unfolds, the tension builds around a single unavoidable truth: the prediction of her death. In a world where Alex's calculations have consistently proven accurate, there's no...
It sets a countdown in motion, not just for her, but for everything happening inside the bunker. With the nuclear reactors becoming unstable and the structure itself on the verge of collapse, the situation escalates into complete chaos. The evacuation protocol is triggered, and suddenly survival becomes the only priority. Amid all of this, Xavier is focused on one thing: finding his family and getting him out. It's a grounded, human objective in the middle of a scenario that has become almost incomprehensible in scale. When Xavier and Sinatra come face to face again, there's a sense that everything has come full circle. Their dynamic has always been tense, but now there's an understanding between them that didn't exist before. They both recognize what's at stake, and more importantly, they both understand that the solution doesn't lie in the bunker. It lies with Alex. This is the moment where Sinatra pieces everything together, realizing that Xavier isn't just another survivor. He's the one the system has been pointing toward all along. He's the key to activating it, the one who can potentially navigate these fractured timelines and choose the path that saves what's left of the world. But in order for that to happen, a decision has to be made, and it's one that carries a cost. The bunker doors need to be sealed to contain the explosion, to prevent the damage from spreading beyond its walls. Once those doors close, anyone left inside won't survive. It's a
moment that forces Sinatra to confront everything she's done and everything she's become. And in the end, she makes the choice to stay behind, sending Xavier out with the knowledge he needs to continue. It's not framed as redemption because nothing can undo the past, but it is a form of acceptance. She takes responsibility in the only way she can, by ensuring that there's still a chance for the future. As the doors begin to close and the structure around her starts to fall apart, there's a quiet shift in tone. The chaos fades into something more reflective, almost symbolic. She walks through the space she created, the bunker that was meant to protect people, now becoming the place where her story ends. There's something poetic about that, the idea that in trying to control the future, she ultimately sealed her own fate. And in her final moments, there's a sense of closure that comes not from victory, but from letting go. The appearance of Dylan in those last seconds isn't just emotional, it's meaningful. It represents the one thing she was never able to move past, the loss that defined everything she did afterwards. Seeing him again, even in that abstract way, suggests that in death she finds a kind of peace that she could never reach while she was alive. And as powerful as that ending is, it's only setting the stage for what comes next, because the story is far from over. Xavier's role is only just beginning, and the path ahead of him is more uncertain than ever.
Xavier stepping out of that bunker wasn't a victory. It was the beginning of something far more overwhelming, because for the first time since everything fell apart, there is no safety net left. The illusion of protection is gone. The bunker is no longer a refuge, and the outside world is exactly as dangerous as it was always meant to be. What makes his situation even more difficult is the fact that just as he's reunited with his family, he's now being pulled away from them again, not by circumstance, but by responsibility. He is the one person Alex has effectively chosen, the one individual who stands at the center of all these intersecting timelines, and that means the weight of every possible outcome now rests on him. It's not just about survival anymore, it's about correction, about undoing damage that may already be irreversible. And the journey he's about to take, most likely toward the second bunker, is not just physical, it's deeply tied to understanding how far Alex's influence truly reaches, and whether it can actually be controlled. What the finale subtly sets up is the terrifying reality of what's happening to the planet itself.
Earlier in the season, there were hints about environmental collapse reaching a second phase, and now that the characters are being forced back into the real world, those warnings start to feel much more immediate. The temperature rising, the atmosphere becoming unstable, the oceans evaporating. These aren't distant possibilities anymore. They are
Inevitable outcomes that are already in motion. The comparison to Venus wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a direct indication of where things are heading if nothing changes. And this is where the urgency behind Project Alex becomes even more clear. Because if the system can truly identify a path that avoids that fate, then Xavier's mission isn't just important, it's absolutely critical. Without it, the people who managed to survive this long are simply delaying the inevitable. At the same time, the show doesn't let go of its more personal and character-driven threads, and one of the biggest reveals that quietly shifts the stakes even further is the confirmation that Jane is still alive. The absence of her body in what was supposed to be her final scene is not a coincidence. It's a deliberate clue, and it completely changes how we should be looking at her role moving forward. Throughout the season, she has been positioned as someone unpredictable, dangerous, and deeply unstable, but now there's a sense that her importance goes far beyond that.
the message that was sent back in time, the idea that she needed to be stopped at a very specific moment, suggests that whatever she is going to do hasn't happened yet, but it's significant enough to alter the course of everything. That kind of setup doesn't exist without payoff, and it strongly points toward her being one of the central conflicts in the final season. What makes her arc particularly interesting is that she's not operating with the same awareness as someone like Xavier. She's not trying to save the world, she's reacting, driven by her own instincts, her own trauma, and now, most likely, a desire for revenge after everything that's happened to her. That makes her incredibly dangerous, because while Alex may be calculating outcomes and trying to guide events toward a specific future, Jane represents chaos, something that doesn't follow predictable patterns. And in a story that is increasingly focused on control versus unpredictability, she might be the one element that even Alex struggles to account for. Then there are the side characters, whose roles may have seemed smaller throughout the season, but are clearly being positioned for something more meaningful moving forward. The dynamic between Jeremy and Robinson, while not as impactful as some of the main storylines, still serves a purpose in showing how people change under pressure. Robinson's willingness to accept death in that moment, contrasted with Jeremy's decision to come back for her, highlights a shift in his character, suggesting that he's beginning to move away from who he was and towards something more grounded, more selfless. It's not a dramatic transformation, but it's enough to indicate that he may play a more active role when things
escalate further, and with characters like Robinson and others being aware of what Jane is capable of, it sets up the possibility of multiple perspectives clashing in the final season, not just over survival, but over how to deal with threats that don't have clear solutions. What really makes this finale stand out, though, is how it manages to balance all of these moving parts without losing focus. It answers some of the biggest questions that have been building throughout the season, particularly around the identity and purpose of Alex, while still leaving enough unresolved to create genuine anticipation for what comes next. The introduction of time manipulation as a core element of the story could have easily made things confusing or overly complicated, but instead it's handled in a way that adds depth without taking away from the emotional core of the narrative. The show never forgets that at its heart, this is still a story about people, about loss, about choices, and about the consequences that come with trying to change things that may not be meant to be changed. The emotional weight of Sinatra's ending is a perfect example of this balance. Her story doesn't conclude with a sense of triumph or even redemption in the traditional sense, but it does provide closure in a way that feels earned. She doesn't undo her mistakes. She doesn't suddenly become something she wasn't, but she does face the reality of her actions and accepts the outcome. The imagery in her final moments, walking through the remains of what she built, seeing echoes of the past, and ultimately being reunited with her son, carries a quiet kind of impact that lingers long after the episode ends. It's not just about her death, it's about what it represents. The end of a journey that was driven by grief, by desperation, and by a need to fix something that was never truly fixable. Xavier, on the other hand, represents the opposite side of that idea. Where Sinatra tried to control the future and paid the price for it, Xavier is now being asked to navigate it, to move through uncertainty and somehow find the one path that leads to survival. The difference is that he's not driven by control, he's driven by connection, by his desire to protect the people he loves.
That's what makes him the right choice, not because he has the knowledge or the power, but because he has something that Alex itself doesn't, a human perspective that values people over outcomes. And if there's any chance of choosing the right future, it's going to come from that. By the time the episode comes to a close, there's a clear sense that everything is about to expand even further. The world outside is no longer a mystery, it's a threat. The technology that was once hidden is now central to the story. The characters are no longer confined to a